Coming up next on Two Cops, One Donut. How do we, at least on the state side, start combating the permanent presence? What's your thought? What's a good game plan to start fighting that?
Well, I think something we've been pushing, and this is it doesn't directly answer your question, but it'll get there. So it's going to be a little bit of a long
Okay,
road. Um,
no worries.
One of the things we've been pushing is designating them as narco terrorists because it opens so many doors for us. So if the U.S. government would say Mexican cartels are indeed terrorists by how they operate, what they do, blah blah blah, and we designate them as such as a country, that starts opening up doors. And some of the bigger doors that it opens is the ability to start seizing and locking up assets of anyone who does business with them. So Western unions, the companies that are laundering money essentially for the cartels. I don't know about
And
all that, dude.
there we go.
Boom,
Hi,
there he
everybody.
is.
Welcome to the show. All
Texas
right.
and Arizona in the house so far.
Yep. I am your host, Eric Levine. This is the podcast, Two Cops, One Donut. If you're looking for our website, it can be the number 2 cops, the number 1 donut. You could do it that way. I bought both. So, or you can spell it all out. Spelling it all out works the best. Yeah. So, and I got it since Flock is on here, and I am sponsored by another LPR company. I do have to mention my LPR company that sponsors me, which is Insight LPR, which is another great LPR company. So enough of my sales pitch. Yes, check them both out. I have experience with both great companies, all great people. That's the important part. You got guys like Craig, very awesome. LinkedIn user from Virginia. I don't know who that is, but what's up, Virginia? Nice to have you join us.
I got peeps in Roanoke.
Okay. So I am going to make sure we've got our LinkedIn working. We've got our Facebook working. YouTube is also working. So Craig's laughing. Sorry, Craig. You knew I had to, buddy. Let's see. What else do we got here? Let's go back to the chat window. Let me close this out. Anybody, again, if you're on Facebook and you want us to see your name, there's a link in the chat. It says chat.restream.io/Facebook. So I want to get all my notifications out of the way. So one, we just gave a shout out to our sponsor, Insight LPR. Thank you for continuous support of the show. They've been backing me for well over a year, so very cool.
There you go. You got
Steve Nethria, there we go.
Yeah.
They're jumping on. Insight LPR in the house. Looking forward to the discussion.
Steve and I are going to be talking tomorrow.
He heard there was a Flock guy in the house. He's like, oh shit, he ain't not showing me. Let me get this out of the way. I'm going to show this on the screen. So for those that know, I am a part of the National Real-Time Crime Center Association, which is a mouthful. But if you know what a real-time crime center is and you use things such as Insight and Flock and these cameras connect to a central room, like if you can picture the TV show 24 where they're in the mission ops room and they got all the screens on the wall. The war room, yeah, they're typing away on the computers and stuff. Like, I just need a minute, I'm hacking into the mainframe. Like, that's kind of what a real-time crime center is. And we're having our very first association conference in New Orleans. So I have it up on the screen. And if your police department knows nothing about them, if they already have one, if you guys are wanting to learn how to do more things, we have workshops, we have all these different things, but more importantly, we have this conference coming up, and that is going to be, it's on the screen right now. It's September 25th through the 28th. It'll be at the Sheraton off of Canal Street.
Dude, who doesn't want to go to New Orleans?
Dude, I know, right? So one, you'll at least have a good time because it's New Orleans. Two, we have all these workshops. So if you're just listening, I suggest you find us on YouTube or whatever social media has got this going live right now. And you will be able to see the workshops that we have. So
dude, that is going to be the conference or the association of the future of policing right there.
Yes, I agree. So here we go. I mean, I'm just going to give you some first day, learn how to build a pole cam. You can do that. We have the OSINT, OSINT open source tools and human trafficking, which is going to kind of go along with what we're going to be talking about later on. Somebody said, crazy that it was just a thought from a bunch of screenwriters when 24 came out. Freaking tech is awesome. That's why I love Star Trek and Star Wars, because it inspires the stuff we see today.
Who would have thought?
Right? Certification training. This is another thing. The National Real-Time Crime Center Association, this is kind of what our main mission is we saw all these police departments doing great things with these real-time crime centers. Some people's stuff works better than others. Some people's stuff works better for their region. Some people, so we got all these different ways to use this stuff. And we wanted a best practices. We wanted to get all this great information and just get it in one centralized area, because unless you know a unit or another agency that's doing it, like, how are you going to learn this stuff? So that's what we started doing over a year ago. And now we're having a conference, and we're going to teach you guys how to do what we're doing and the best practices out there and get you certified in what you have. So just like you said, it's going to be the future of policing in a sense. It's going to turn even the shittiest detectives into Sherlock Holmes. And we got all these different things. So we would love for you guys to get registered. I think we have like maybe 150 spots left. So
Nice.
It's closing up fast. But if you head to our website at nrtcca.org. Yeah, nrtcca.org. You know what? I got an easier way to do this. Here we go.
Put the
You
link
see
in the chat.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm about to do. So here it is. You can join our membership. It's $25 a year.
Oh, yeah.
But this link will at least get you to the website. It's going to take you to the membership portion, but you just head over to the events tab, which you can see on our screen right now. Just click that events tab and you'll see all this stuff. So, but yeah, I wanted to give them a shout out because one, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be speaking a lot because I'm the communications board member for them. And I don't get paid to do this, guys. I do it because I love police work. And just like my guest said, it is the future of policing. I saw the writing on the wall before we even got started. Here is a class list. I mean, just one of the cool things on there is going to be drones, gang and drug operations. What else? We got street takeovers. That's another big one. Human trafficking, which touches on what we're going to be talking about here in a second. And here is all of these are not sponsors of the podcast necessarily, but they are sponsors of that conference. So I'll give them a little shout out here. So you guys get a chance to see them. Two of which we just talked about, Flock Safety and Insight. They are two. That's what I like about those companies is they saw the writing on the wall as well, and they decided to jump on board at the very beginning. So good for them to have that type of insight of the future. See what I did there?
Yep.
See what I did there?
Yep, I like it.
All right. I'll get off of this. Let's get out of there and let's get to the main part of what we decided to do here. So I have my guest with me, Matthew Thomas, out of Pinell County. He is is it chief deputy or deputy chief?
It's chief deputy. We have deputy chiefs are the rank just below mine. So the deputy chiefs, I have a deputy chief over the jail and a deputy chief over sworn. Oh, it's all good, dude. Come on, man. You know better than that. But chief deputy is the official title, also known as undersheriff in some parts of the world.
Undersheriff. I like it.
Yeah.
Hopefully not too under, sir. How are them knees?
No.
But Matt, we've had you on the podcast before. That's kind of how you and I struck up a friendship and whatnot. And we know you got well over 20 years of doing a lot of crazy shit, but more specifically, not human trafficking. You got me on that. Mexican cartels. That is the whole point of this. So much experience that you were like, damn, like this is getting bad. I need to write a book to at least let people know what the hell I've been seeing. So you've got a book out there.
Yep.
And the name of your book, sir?
Is Interceptors. Let me see. Here we go. Interceptors is my book.
Okay. Interceptors.
Published that November of last year.
Very cool. I actually think I have, let me see here. I'm looking for my captions. I think I put it on my, nope, I did not. I thought I did.
Oh, okay.
I thought I put a link to the website up there. Sorry. I
So
wasn't
good,
that far
bro.
ahead of the game. We got too much chatting going on.
I know, dude. We got on here and started catching up. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. All right. So I'm just kind of waiting for people to float on. They don't need to because this is all going to be recorded anyway. But give a little bit of background. Let people know where you're from, all that stuff, and what got you specifically into the Mexican cartel expertise.
Okay, so Matt Thomas is my name. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, and grew up on the South Side. And I grew up primarily Hispanic neighborhood, gangs, drugs, all that stuff around, kind of Section 8 housing. And I had a very unique upbringing in the sense that that was one side of my life. So living with my single mom, Section 8 housing, rough neighborhood, all Hispanic gangs for the most part around us. And then the other side of that was my mom's family, because my dad was out of the picture at that point. Mom's family were all um, not well off, but just a much better life: hunting, fishing, stability, no gangs really, none of that stuff going on. So I had a mixture of a good family life and growing up in a rough area, and so that was my introduction to the Mexican culture because I grew up with all Mexican dudes, and learned how to eat correctly in a Mexican household, learned what to eat. Learned a lot of the cuss words, learned to listen for my name, right, in conversations.
Pinche way. I
Yeah,
know someone.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I thought for years that meant the cool white guy, but it
Gringo pinche way.
didn't.
Yeah.
um, but moved out of the Phoenix area as a 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old. And my mom moved me out. She saw everything that was going on and took us out to a rural part of Arizona outside of Phoenix and a farming community, and finished out my high school years there, still with a heavy Hispanic influence, heavy Hispanic culture, farming area. I worked on a farm in the fields with the migrants in the summertime in high school. And then after high school, I was a young 20 years old when I got into this career, and I have been
Could you
here ever
speak the
since.
language?
No, not real fluently. I spoke very broken. I could understand a lot more than I could speak, and I grew up learning slang, right? So
Yeah.
when you learn slang, sometimes it's hard to put it all together and make correct Spanish, especially when you're talking to educated Spanish speakers, because you
Right.
you sound like an idiot.
Yeah. um, well, yeah. I mean, I try to explain that to people, especially my family back home,
Mm,
because I'm from Michigan, and I tell them like, yeah, it's weird. I can get by
mhm,
on a call that's strictly Spanish speaking, and I understand. I just don't speak it.
right,
We'll go to, and this is kind of an easy way to transition to that, but go to a Mexican restaurant, like a true
right,
Tex-Mex place here, and they don't speak a lick of English. And you
right.
come in, you're like, I want this with no onions, and then you're trying to kind of say it. I don't
Yeah.
say it very well, but they'll repeat, and I'll understand right away. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
yeah, she got what I meant.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, we're good.
Yep.
And but yeah, you do. You tend to understand a lot more, especially weapons. I understand all of the weapons.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I hear them say anything, I automatically, my radar goes off.
Well, and then
Um,
working for me, working undercover, I picked up a lot as well. But then it becomes dialect too, because Arizona, we're right up against Sonora, and so there's a different dialect between Sonorans and Sinaloans and those from Chihuahua, and so you have to pick up different dialects, different slang, and one slang word here may be a compliment or be used normally, and that same word somewhere else is a derogatory statement. So you got to be careful with all that stuff.
right, right. So like when I walk in the room, I'm like, what's up, asshole? Like that's a term of endearment to my
Right,
buddies.
right.
They know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
gotcha. Um, with that, just to help people get a mental picture, how
yeah.
far away from the border are you?
Our county, I think the
Miles wise.
closest point is probably just over 50, between 50 and 60 miles is the closest part of our county to the Mexican border. But our county is very unique. And again, in the book, I kind of go through this and describe it. And that's what we're, going to do here is talk about some of this. So our county is unique in the sense that that part of our county, the southwest part of our county, is 50, 60 miles off the border, but it's wide open desert, um, all the way down to the border, and then some of those areas that it hits the border are barbed wire fences, 3-strand barbed wire fences. So it's wide open, and then a good portion of that is also reservation. It's the Tohono O'odham Reservation, and so
Oh,
you have a Native American reservation that essentially starts just south of I-8, which is in our county, and runs all the way into Mexico. It's the only reservation that crosses international boundaries there, and it goes over into both sides.
and they honor it?
Yeah, they do. And the funny thing is, I don't know how much Mexico honors it, but they have their area there on the south side of the line, and
Huh.
they're able to walk freely back and forth from Mexico to the U.S. with no issues.
Really?
Yep. Yep.
That is interesting. So, okay, with that being a factor,
Mhm.
have you guys noticed, or do they communicate for one? Does the reservation police communicate with y'all on the issues that they've been dealing with and how they deal with it and all that?
Yes.
With
So we have a great working relationship with Tohono O'odham. It hasn't always been great, but it has gotten better, especially with this sheriff. He's much better at navigating those waters than sheriffs previous. But we
okay,
we have a good relationship with them, and they have the same issues that we all have. They have a huge area that they're covering. So we're like our county is 5,400 square miles, and we have 250 sworn. They have about the same size, probably a little bit bigger, I would say, and they have like 100 to cover that. And so very strapped for manpower. And then again, they're a sovereign nation, so they're treated a little bit differently, right? So all that factors in, and the cartels exploit that too. They marry into that tribe so that they have familial connections, and they there's no doubt they use. I've been in these stash houses between here and Mexico where they're using the reservation as cover because they know that normal cops, aren't going to be going in there.
okay. Now, between that, their ways of handling laws and protecting the border is different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They are so. It's it's really different in the sense that the nation their beliefs are at the forefront of everything, right? So whatever that nation, whatever their strong beliefs are, and let's just these are not examples for Tohono O'odham. I'm just using it as a very simplified example. If their beliefs are preservation of nature, that's at the forefront of all their decision making. And so that they use that as their guiding principle on how they do everything, and which would include enforcing laws or law enforcement interacting. And so their belief system is always at the forefront, and then everything else kind of falls after that. And so, like their view on the border, like when you're talking about walls, is that's their land. It's sacred land. And while they are a sovereign nation, and the U.S. government could technically come in and say, "Yeah, we're putting a wall here," but I think that would cause quite the fight with the TO nation specifically. So they have a lot of control down there, and they have their sovereignty, which they should. That's their land.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was interested in the dynamics with that because essentially I would think that, and this is extreme, but if they were like set up a firing line, like nobody crosses the border,
Right.
like can they do that? I don't
You
know
know,
what the
I
rules
I
are.
I imagine that the our big government, Washington D.C., would step in, if there was something like that going on. But realistically, again, they are a sovereign nation, so I think they can do things that would be outside of the norm for the rest of us, right? And they could,
Yeah, at
um,
least for the state.
right? But if you've ever
Yeah.
been to any reservation, dude, natives are some of the most accepting, and they they're accepting, and they put up with a lot, right? They try not to have confrontation, and so I think that's where the Mexican cartels exploit them because
Yeah.
they take advantage of that.
So they are going through and they're
Oh,
trying to, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
They use
let's,
that land more than any land. They cross their land and use it all the way up to get to the essentially the Phoenix hub.
okay. So now that we know the historical factor of the cartels kind of coming across,
Mhm.
passing dope, tunnels, all sorts of like old school methods to
Right.
get dope over here, you know, through trucks and hiding stuff in vehicles and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I want to focus on what we're dealing with today, the
Okay.
stuff that you are seeing today that needs to wake people up.
So the stuff we're seeing today. So let's talk about just this. I have a Sound of Freedom. I know people can't see it, but it's a Sound of Freedom shirt. And so
It's
I've
your just your voice is what I thought was the sound of freedom.
but we've been talking about kids a lot lately, right? And how bad that problem is. And so the sheriff, he attends some of these meetings where they're talking numbers, and they were talking over the last year how we had it was in excess of 40,000 unaccompanied minors that were documented. So you have at least 40,000 kids that were not with the adult that is part of their family. They're just with these random people, and they're coming into the US. And so that tells you what I mean, obviously, you know the problem with that, right? If you have unaccompanied minors and bad guys get a hold of them, there's nothing good that's going to happen. And if you're talking in excess of 40,000 of those, that's a lot of kids being damaged by bad guys.
Yeah.
So that is a huge problem right now. Human trafficking is just off the charts. And when we look at our southern border, specifically in Arizona, and they call it, it's illegal aliens. Well, no, it is, but it isn't. The cartels control this. It's a trade. So the cartels control the routes. They control the payment to use those routes, the taxes. They control all that. So it's a criminal organization that is essentially coordinating these movements, and they are the ones that take the payment for it. So there's a definite problem with all of the human trafficking, and then you throw the dope in with it, and the fentanyl is through the roof. And we called this, I think it was 2018, early 2018, when we first started seeing fentanyl. And so we were like, whoa, 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 we need to start letting people know, because whatever's coming into Arizona, whatever we start seeing different, that's coming to your neighborhood next. It's a matter of time before it spreads throughout the US, because they're pushing a product. And so the fentanyl was a big thing, still is, and now we're seeing they're mixing in xylazine, and that's becoming a thing. And so now you have kind of this poly drug mixture that they're pushing, which Narcan doesn't work on. So you're going to have overdoses that the cops on the street are equipped with Narcan. Narcan is going to be ineffective, so you're going to have more deaths than we have now just with fentanyl. So you
Can you
take those two
describe
things.
what the xylazine is?
Dude, no, because I'm not well versed on it. Sorry.
Me either.
It's a new, and it's in the opioid family, but it's a new one that they're putting in there. And what people need to understand, and I'm not being conspiracy theorist here, China is directly connected to all of this, right? They are 100% supplying the chemicals, pushing this stuff through. So when you see this stuff, it really, really concerns me, because I think our country is in a bad place right now, right? We have a lot of division in our country. We have a lot of just political division, and then you have all this classism and racism and all these schisms and cis, and so everybody's divided. And at the same time, we have criminal elements that are pushing stuff into our country that is causing further problems with addictions and overdoses. And you have let's say, behind the Mexican cartels, you have a nation that absolutely wants to do our country damage, that has the means to facilitate all of that happening. And so we're in a really bad place, man.
So you're saying that the cartels want to jack up the U.S.
Mm,
Or are you saying other countries are
I'm s-
supporting the cartels
yeah.
to ensure that,
I think
like China?
the cartels basically want to make money, right? They want money and
Right.
power. And so any means they have to do to get that, they're going to do it. And the Chinese see an opportunity to help them do that, while also damaging our country
Gotcha.
and softening it up for, you know,
Yeah.
I, I I hope we never see a day where we have a takeover attempt, but Dude, the way China's playing in the whole world, I I just feel like something bad is coming, and I feel like I really worry about my son. I have a 15-year-old, and I feel like he's going to be the one tasked with really trying to save our country at some point.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the weapons you fire, so I know he'll be well armed there in Arizona.
Yeah, I think he's one of the only kids in his class that has fired a minigun a couple times.
Oh, the electric minigun?
Yeah.
Jesus, that's like 3,000 rounds a second. Some
Yeah, no,
crazy
dude,
ass
I know.
number.
I tried to explain to him at the time that I said, dude, there are grown men that would literally give an arm to do what you're doing. I said, you really need to
Yeah.
appreciate, the fact that you're firing a minigun.
Yeah. Did you explain it in dollar amount how
Oh,
much
dude, yeah,
every bullet is that
yeah, yeah.
comes out of that
And as
thing?
the brass is just pouring down.
Yeah, yeah. You just add up the money.
Yeah,
Cha-ching, cha-ching,
yeah,
cha-ching. I just did my military time, and I didn't know it,
yeah. I
but the Air
remember the late
Force,
night selfies.
yeah, the Air Force just switched over to automatic ARs. So
Nice,
full.
dude. About
Yeah,
time they
instead
got
of
on
three.
board.
I know. Instead of the 3 round burst, I was like, "Holy shit! This is like every time I'd fire, I could actually hear freedom ringing
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
ears."
And dude, you can control that 3 round burst. I mean, the full auto, you can put it in 3 and 4 round bursts all day long.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like, I was surprised at how easy it
yeah,
was to control. Yeah. It was fun. I liked it. But
yeah.
as far as the cartels, there's a bunch. It's not just one.
Yeah,
So people need to understand that are wondering like what is this problem? Why are they such an issue?
right.
Well, some of them are explain. Okay, if you can
Yeah.
explain the level of money we're talking about.
Oh, we're talking $500 billion industry, man. I mean, they're off the charts with their money. And then just real quick,
More than countries.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But we'll do
Yeah.
a quick breakdown, right? Okay, so here's the deal. Pablo Escobar was the kingpin, right? The Colombians were running the show. Cocaine was the big thing, right? 80s, Miami Vice, all that stuff. The Mexicans were just the
as,
transporters.
as you hit your
Yeah,
nose. Yeah.
you know. But the Mexicans were really just transporters because they had the routes from way back in the Pancho Villa days when alcohol was smuggled through, right? And so here's if we need to go back just a little bit further.
Little history lesson. All
Yeah, yeah,
right. I
yeah.
like
There's
it.
a Chinese connection because if you remember, there were railroads being built in the U.S. and in Mexico, and traditionally they were Chinese slaves that were working on those railroads in both countries. And so you had the opium trade going on down in Mexico, and then you had alcohol, and so they were using these routes. And again, you refer back to like Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa had smuggling routes that he was running, and some of the natives, right? Because again, we had reservations, and those natives were going back and forth as well. So you had these previously established smuggling routes, and the Mexicans kind of had the market on that, on getting it into the U.S. through the southern route. So they teamed up with the Colombians. And if you watch Narcos, dude, Narcos does a fantastic job of breaking this all down and how they took power. So essentially, what happened was the U.S. takes out Colombian drug lords, and the Mexicans use that as an opportunity to move into power and take the trade for themselves and become not just transporters, but take over the drug trade. And so they started moving into power, and they originally there was one cartel. It was the Guadalajara cartel, and it wasn't even a cartel. Like we named that shit, and it just kind of stuck. So it was Guadalajara was the original, and you had Felix Gallardo, and he was like the Godfather. And then you had Kiki Camarena, who was a DEA agent. He was killed. That brought a lot of heat on them, and it was at that point that they realized we have to insulate ourselves better and we have to operate this better. So they ended up splitting and they regionalized. And so you had they created these plazas, right, which are regions. And so they set up plaza bosses. So they set up 5 regions originally, and they put a boss in charge of each one. And so, for instance, Chapo Guzman becoming the boss of the Sinaloa Plaza. And so all of these bosses were put in charge of their 5 plazas, and they were running their stuff. And then, of course, as happens many times in criminal organizations, they started having infighting where this guy thought that guy was doing it wrong and he was doing it right, and so I want to take over his territory, and you started getting these territorial fights, and then you had Gallardo get arrested, and he goes to prison, which creates a power vacuum as we've seen with Chapo as well. power vacuum happens and everybody starts fighting for that spot. And so these cartels kind of bloomed into what they became, where you had the Gulf cartel over in the Tamaulipas, Gulf of Mexico area. You had the BLO, the Beltran Leyvas, Arturo, oh my God, Carrillo Fuentes. You had the Sinaloans, you had the Tijuana. And so all of them were doing their own thing, had their own plazas and running and everything. And then they started vying for power, right? So it's all about territory. And back in like, it must have been about '06, '07, probably '07, '08. Um, the funny thing was the cartels were some of the first to use like social media to kind of start fighting and start doing propaganda. So back, if you it won't be on YouTube anymore. They took a lot of this stuff down. But back then, I was working undercover, and the Gulf cartel, who ultimately created the Zetas because they hired ex Mexican military guys to be
Which I've
their
heard of those guys.
yeah, over in Texas, they're strong presence. So the Zetas worked for the Gulf cartel, and at that time, the Gulf cartel and the Sinaloans were going at it and hated each other, right, and trying to kill each other on a normal basis. Well, they would post on YouTube, and they did these. They were funny as hell videos where they would have like a picture of the boss, like I am right now, but they would crop in a mouth talking, and it wasn't the boss talking, but they were saying things for the boss. So the boss's face would be there, and it looked like he was talking.
Yeah.
And one of them was the boss of the golf cartel, and he was saying, "I like little boys, and I'm gay, and that kind of stuff." And in a machismo kind of, the Mexican culture is a very machismo culture, so they were
Yeah.
basically calling each other bitches on YouTube, and
Okay.
it caused, dude, it caused a hell of a war. They were going at it because of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward, and it just kept morphing, right? And territories move back and forth. They'll gain some, they'll lose some, they'll gain some, they'll lose some. So that's been going on the whole time, all the way up until current. And you have it now, and you have with Chapo being taken out, you have the Sinaloans kind of split, and you have the Chapitos, which are Chapo's kids essentially, and they're trying to hold on to what he built, and then you have the CJNG who's trying to take over the world, and they're becoming the new Sinaloa cartel because the Sinaloans were kind of the force to be reckoned with for quite a number of years, and now you have the CJNG that's up and coming and trying to be that same all-encompassing cartel, and so it's just a constant evolution, and their technology, dude, is through the roof. They are as technologically advanced as any special ops or any of that stuff. They're using all the same systems. It's crazy.
Yeah, they don't need to be as technologically advanced as the government of the United States needs to be. They only need to be as advanced as the special ops work because that's how they operate. They
Right.
don't operate as a whole government.
No, and
They don't need to get their mission done.
right, and they're very compartmentalized. They've done a good job of compartmentalizing themselves. So a transport cell doesn't know the money cell, doesn't know the production cell, and so they're all very compartmentalized. And we've caught people that, where are you going with this? I have no idea. I'm going to drive, and then they're going to call me, and they're going to tell me to go to this spot, and then when I get to that spot, I meet some person that tells me go to a different spot, and so everything is very very well coordinated, very well compartmentalized, and very well insulated because they've learned from us. Every time we would do a case, or the U.S. government would do a case on a cartel, they would debrief that entire case amongst themselves, right, to figure out where did we have gaps and how can we fix it.
And looking at it from a governmental point of view, what is the problem with their government that they could not get these cartels, or is it they just don't want to, or do the cartels have them under their thumb? Like, what is the reason their government isn't stopping them?
Well, because I think if Mexico won't say this, but Mexico's a corrupted state. And when you say that, people get kind of offended, but it's not necessarily corrupted, meaning that they're all on the take. Some of them are simply trying to survive and trying to keep their families alive, right? And
Mm.
so the cartels have their tentacles into everything, everywhere. And so you have government officials, I would say from the highest office down, where the cartels have influence on that government and in such a way that they can affect escapes, they can affect free operations in certain areas, all that kind of stuff. And then I think our own government has a role to play because, as we've learned from the '80s and the crack epidemic that took place in LA and then across the country, our own government can become its own enemy when certain factions of the government do rogue operations.
Um, in that, how I would think that that is how they are, because they are currently infiltrating our states, our border
Mhm.
states, correct?
Mhm.
Or they already have established some sort of permanent presence.
Oh, they like Arizona, dude, in Texas, they've got permanent presence, and a lot of it is familial too, right? Because like I was explaining to another guy that where my county sits, that was Mexico at one point until we bought some land. And when the U.S. bought that land, it moved the line south, and so you had family members. If they lived far enough south, they stayed in Mexico, and other ones that were far enough north became U.S. citizens overnight because of a land purchase. And so those two people, though, are still connected via family. So you have a brother that became a U.S. citizen who has his other brother that stayed a Mexican citizen because the line didn't reach him. And because of that, you have those familial bonds that, I mean, those are, especially in the Hispanic culture, dude, those are stronger than anything.
Okay. How how do we, at least on the state side, start combating the permanent presence? What's your thought? What's a good game plan to start fighting that?
Well, I think something we've been pushing, and this is, it doesn't directly answer your question, but it'll get there. So it's going to be a little a little bit of a long
Okay,
road. Um,
no worries.
One of the things we've been pushing is designating them as narco terrorists because it opens so many doors for us. So if the US government would say Mexican cartels are indeed terrorists by how they operate, what they do, blah, 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 and we designate them as such as a country, that starts opening up doors. And some of the bigger doors that it opens is the ability to start seizing and locking up assets of anyone who does business with them. So Western unions, the companies that are laundering money essentially for the cartels, the businesses that are bringing in chemicals and saying, oh, we didn't sell to the cartels, but it ends up in the cartel hands. So all those businesses, you can start locking those up. You can start seizing their assets. Um, Opens those doors. And then it also lets us get those, the dudes that we have in America that it's like in case of emergency, break this glass, and then those dudes fly out of the sky.
Yeah,
It allows those dudes to go do some of the work they've done overseas in our
the Team
backyard.
America guys.
Team
Yeah.
America guys, yeah. So they get to jump out of planes and they get to go start. Because here's the thing, man. People don't like to admit this, and I guess the U.S. really doesn't like to think about they don't like to think about how dirty of work it is to do cop work and the military work. And I think other countries have a clear understanding. And I have a buddy that worked in the IDF, and he told me, why you guys can't win is because you're not willing to do what it takes to win. And I was like, okay, break that down for me, bro. And he said, for instance, he says, in the IDF, we chase our enemies nonstop, relentlessly, because we want them to always be on the run and want them to always understand that we're coming for them. He says, you guys and he's saying, you guys, US, the US is reactionary to everything. You let people do stuff, and then you're like, all right, you better not do that again. And we wait for it to happen again. And then we're like, all right, we're going to come after you. And he says, no, we chase them down relentlessly. We kill them. We kill, everybody associated with that bad event, just like terrorists. So I think if we open the floodgates on that, we put these bad guys on the run in their own backyard, in their country, and then it allows U.S. law enforcement to start focusing on the bad guys on this side of the country, right? So U.S. we start focusing solely on these dudes over here that have those connections. Uh, on that side of the border, our military is taking care of that problem to keep them out of our country and to keep them on the run. I think that combination will do part of it, right? That's going to be the going after bad guys part. And then, dude, we have to admit that our nation has to fix itself on the user end, because the only reason that shit's being flooded into our country is because we have so many users.
So we're not being tough enough on it. And two, we need to change the criteria and switch them over to terrorists.
Yep.
Okay.
And that
So
would open a lot of doors and help quite a bit.
okay. So it's not necessarily uh like some of the more opinionated popular fixes I've heard is just legalize the drugs that they're bringing over here.
That's not a solution. We can see, look at Portland, Washington, that area. That's a perfect example of that's not a viable solution.
Yeah, I just had Chris Foreman on.
Yeah, yeah. Chris is my
Who's been
boy.
out
Yeah,
with y'all, and we actually discussed that specifically. I said, now, you know, there's people that are going to argue that if you just legalize the stuff, the crime would go away
yeah.
and make it a medical issue.
Right.
And,
Well, same
you know,
argument that if you just keep the police out of everybody's business, that crime will fix itself. We know that's bullshit. It's proven itself as well.
yeah, it gets worse.
Mhm.
You know, maybe we could fix a lot of the cartel problems if they just solved it democratically and had votes for power struggles and,
You know, dude, I never thought of that.
you
Maybe,
know,
yeah. I mean,
suggest that to them.
maybe we just hand out olive branches and say, "Look, guys, we think you've been doing this wrong. If you
Yeah,
guys would just get along
together.
and yeah, and vote,
Yeah,
and
unify.
right, yeah, and here's the thing: like, if you have disagreements, let's sit down, let's talk it through, let's come to a shared understanding, and then we'll move forward. I'm sure that could
Yeah,
work. Yeah,
yeah, gentleman's agreement on
dude,
territory, all that stuff.
I've
Or
been doing
shoot,
this wrong my whole career. Holy
just
cow!
just make a super cartel.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just be what you know, the Mexican cartel.
Right, yeah, and
Boom,
you can
bam.
only join if you're voted in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Standard vote
Yeah,
too. You know, it's got to be majority vote.
that's
Can't
it,
just have.
dude.
And maybe we could even do some electoral votes for the states.
There you go. Yeah, we can get them
Right.
on Wall Street, and yeah, dude, we've been
I
doing
think
it
we
so
just
wrong.
helped solve a lot of the cartels' problems
Yep.
for them. Is there any other countries trying to fight these guys?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The cartels are the Mexican cartels. When I first started, just kind of fighting this fight, they were drug trafficking organizations, but that's what our government labeled them as DTOs, right? Everything's DTO or MLO, a money laundering organization. They have since transcended that title, and they are transnational criminal organizations, meaning that they are all over the world and they are involved in crime. So they're not just drugs, they're not just money laundering, they're into counterfeiting, they steal precious metals, precious jewels, oil. They're into all of it and any way they can make money. And so they are worldwide, and you have nations all over the world that are fighting this same problem.
Um, who is, and this may not be your level of expertise, so I
Mhm.
apologize if it's not, but what other countries are there any countries suffering near the same amount of trouble that we're facing?
Ooh, I don't know that from the Mexican cartels, but I do know, just talking to some of the internationals that I know from like the FBI Academy and stuff, that they have similar problems from different demographics, but ultimately a lot of it leads back to a Mexican connection, right? So you'll have whatever country is coming into their country bringing drugs in, but they're somehow linked in with the Mexican cartels as a supplier, or there's some connection. So they don't have it directly, as my understanding, and it is not my area of expertise. That would be your HSIs and your DEAs and those dudes up at the high level. Because I mean, I'm a local cop, so we're not doing high level cases. Typically,
Yeah.
if we are, we're helping out the big feds with those cases.
I was just curious if you had heard anything with, I mean, obviously you've got way more experience in this stuff than I have ever touched. So just curious if they've bullshitted with, you know, like England's getting fucked right now because
Yeah,
they've got, you know, whatever. And then just kind of rumor milled
everybody
it from there.
everybody's getting there's I mean, drugs are just worldwide rampant right now, and I think it's it's part of just our society where they've gone.
Yeah. Now, with where you're at, I know you said you want to do about an hour. So, with where you're at, like, where is the future heading with the violence that you're seeing with them coming over so rampantly right now?
Well, if we
What's your big concerns coming up?
my big concerns is we've all seen the shootouts in Mexico, right? We've seen them. Let's take Chapo's son that they got back, right? He got arrested, and they essentially took siege on an entire town until they got his release. And my concern is what you're seeing in Mexico coming to a town near you in the U.S., where they are willing to go to battle out in the open with U.S. law enforcement, U.S. military, whatever, to maintain control of something or take control of something. And that's a huge concern for us. And we've started to see some of that here where, some of their social media feeds, uh, some of the intel gathered, you start seeing them that they're becoming more and more emboldened. And that's the problem that people don't understand with this whole bullshit of defund the police and all that crap is criminals are watching all of this and they're opportunists. And so you may have some areas that would do just fine without police, right? They can police themselves, whatever, cool. Um, but the criminals pay attention and they start looking for those gaps and they start inserting themselves. And so that's my concern is the cartels are becoming more and more emboldened to do their business openly on our grounds, and not only that, but be confrontational and even go at us sometimes.
Okay. Um, and with y'all over in your area,
Mhm.
um, lately, what has been the biggest issue? Has it been drugs, human trafficking?
Mhm.
What are you guys seeing coming across? Weapons? I mean,
Well, there's weapons and money always going south. So the weapons and money are going back into Mexico for them to fight their wars. Um, Drugs and humans are the two commodities right now. Humans, I would say, are more appealing to the cartels right now because it's a reusable commodity, especially if you're talking like sex trafficking. So if I traffic a person, I can use that person over and over and over and continue to get money from that commodity. Whereas a drug, they use it, they're done, they need new drugs, and so the Mexicans would have to resupply more drugs. So humans are definitely the leading commodity, and they're making. So if you want to cross the border from Mexico into the U.S. illegally, the cartel is going to charge you between $6,000 and $15,000, depending on who you are, where you're from, all that kind of stuff. So they're making, and you got to think about this too. When I say those numbers, so let's just go low end, right? They're charging $6,000 a person, and let's say they get a group of 100 cross. So you've got $600,000 that the cartel just made, and as soon as those people cross that border, they get caught. Cartels don't give a shit because they got paid. Dope, it's different, right? They've got to get the dope to the spot. It's got to be paid for, essentially consumed, paid for, and then the money comes back. When you're talking humans, that's an immediate return and it's a reusable commodity.
fuck, it's
Yeah,
crazy,
it
man.
is crazy.
Crazy. Um, I heard somebody say that slavery is now worse than it was back when the United States had slavery.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what
That
that's what these people become. They become indentured slaves a lot of times because they can't make the payment, so they have to work it off, and you're never done working it off. It's a Ponzi scheme, man.
Yeah. Do we now? Do you know where the end result, where these people are ending up?
All over, dude. They go all over.
Yeah.
And when you're talking children specifically, they're ending up all over the world wherever the highest bidder is. Because one thing I learned in 2020, because I'm sure you saw it where you were at too, uh, the pedophilia exploded, dude, just exploded in 2020. Like, and I think it was always there. We just saw it more because everybody was kind of cooped up, which really made you understand that throughout the world, there are some sick bastards that will do unspeakable stuff to kids. And kids have become a hot commodity because it's an acceptable thing with a lot of these cultures. And then, let's not sugarcoat it. Here in the U.S., if you have enough money, you can get away with anything.
Damn. It's one reason I never got into crimes against children.
Oh, dude, you and me both.
I just
Yeah, I
can't mentally handle the
no, especially if you have kids, man. It's
yeah.
yeah. I've seen enough trauma in my career without adding kids to that. Well, more kids.
Yeah, and then you've got that emotional attachment to it when you have kids of your own.
Hmm.
Which, if you don't have kids, I'm sorry, shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
You
it's
just don't know.
and when
You will never know.
and you people don't. It doesn't matter to people unless it affects them directly. But I can tell you when you see a child that's been raped by an adult, dude, like it takes a piece of your soul because
Yeah,
the kids are just so innocent and these these beasts just I mean it you just it dude it brings a hate out that you
yeah,
never even knew you had on there was one I can remember just talking where you know they did this little girl or the guy did so bad and how he did not get killed before he went to jail because it takes every ounce of your being to not just choke that fucking guy out and kill him right there because he's never going to get better. He's always going to have that desire and he's going to do it to another kid.
yeah, yeah. We most recently, for me, I'm not a obviously I'm not a crimes against children person. I was actually working for my property crimes team at the time. My guy stopped a suspect vehicle outside of a place that keeps getting burglarized. So we're just kind of doing a stop and ID, see what the hell they were doing. And turns out the guy that we dealt with in the passenger seat was playing the name game, but we didn't have a right to hold him for very long. We just did enough to do our investigation, got enough info that we could follow up. So we immediately went back to our sector and we knew something was up. We just weren't sure what it was. I was sure it was dope. I thought for sure it was dope. Just kind of the way he was acting. Turns out he was diabetic, so that kind of explained the twitchiness. But he was a wanted pedophile. Well, the guy that he was out with was his girlfriend, who he was raping her 5-year-old daughter, and had been, and he groomed her, and basically found her at a homeless shelter, and took advantage of the fact that she needed help and needed a place to live and needed to get a place for her kids, and to her defense, I truly believe she was unaware. I think she knew something was kind of up, wasn't quite sure what it was yet, but we had CPS stop out and ended up finding out that the 5-year-old girl who's nonverbal, well, that's why she's nonverbal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, shit like that, man. It just like you said, it brings a hate out of you. You don't realize you have.
Yeah.
And then when you have kids, I think that's and I'm not saying that if you don't have kids, you can't sympathize.
Right.
I just don't think you'll ever truly understand until you have your own.
Because you can't internalize it like a parent can.
Right. And then you're putting yourself in that empathetic state of if that was your kid, which is a good thing to have in cops. I think that's one of the things that I would say the majority of cops have. When you see the good ones out there, it's that empathetic nature that we have where we put ourselves in the shoes of whoever we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, that's what most cops are. I think that's what attracts us to the job. We have a lack of a better term, we have an emotional side to us that we are able to express more by helping other people.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's truly kind of the calling when we want to talk about, what's going on. Man, I don't know what happened to your camera, but all of a sudden you are crispy clear, bro.
What's up, dude? Hey, yeah.
I know your internet connection just decided it was like
right on,
overtime for this.
Yeah, nice, good. Because I've been trying to get all these lessons from Eric. For those watching that don't know, he's been schooling me on cameras and mics. I got this. Look at this mic, dude.
I know you got all that stuff.
I do. I have this stuff, and so we're hoping that this will. As you and I talked, a lot of people are interested in the cartel stuff, and I like talking about it because I know, like you and I have discussed, you don't realize what people know and don't know, and you never want to. Feel like when people say, "Oh, he's an expert in Mexican cartels," I'm like, I really don't like being called an expert because I don't feel like I'm this master of all the knowledge. I know some stuff because I've dealt with some stuff,
But nobody deals with that. All your
Right.
street cops touch it. They
Right.
touch it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, that guy was cartel related.
Yeah.
Fuck, I didn't even know.
Well,
They
dude,
find out after the fact.
so End of Watch, right? So that movie, when I saw that movie,
Yeah.
that kind of, to your point, that was kind of one of those things where you're like, yeah, that's true, man. Like even the LAPDs of the world, probably more so, right? Those big agencies, a street cop has no idea that he's dealing with a straight up cartel captain or whatever, right? And we had that happen
Yeah.
in our area where we had capo level dudes living in our jurisdiction, running operations. And then when you figure it out, when you're like, holy shit, this guy is at that level, and you realize, that this is a straight up killer, that I've been on 2 traffic stops with him, written him a ticket or whatever, and he's a straight up cartel killer. That just kind of blows your mind. Yeah, and there's so much stuff behind these cartels because there's so many different factions within a cartel. There's so many different just arms branches. Like I was talking about earlier, transportation sales, money sales, gun sales, all these different. And when I say sales, I'm talking about the little units themselves that function in these different areas.
Just like a military.
Oh, it is just like the military,
You
and
got special ops.
they have their own
You
call
got your
signs, they
yeah.
have their own signals, they have their own even stickers on cars, dude. When I drive, especially if we go into the west side of Phoenix, you start picking up real quick. You're like, oh, okay, there's a lot of these guys around because you see certain stickers on cars, and you know that translates into this group or that group, and it's crazy, man. When you start paying attention, it's like taking the red pill, the Matrix.
Yeah. Yeah, you wake up out of the matrix like,
Yeah.
what the heck? Yeah, I've had several occasions where I've gotten contacted and they're like, hey, we just want to know how this stop went. We want to know how this encounter went. And I'm like,
Right.
why? And
Who
like,
did
well,
they
we can't
have
really
with them?
talk about it. And as soon as they said, well, we can't really talk about it, I'm like, this is cartel related, isn't it? And they're like, can't really say. I'm like, yeah, it's fucking, yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want to fuck up their investigations.
Now, the
But
funny
that
thing,
gives, I was going to say, that gives people an insight at like just how blind
oh yeah,
regular street cops
right,
are on this stuff.
right, yeah. Because if you don't know, you don't know, right? And
That's why you're an expert.
and why I was a lot of times when I was in it, you would even watch cops come into areas, and we're in the middle of an operation, and we know something big is going down. Let's say in a parking lot of a mall, we know that there's this big thing happening right there, and there's some cartel dudes involved and all this stuff. And then you see regular patrol cops roll in, and you're like, oh, come on, man, just be a good cop and roll on through. Don't pay attention to anything, right? We don't want you
Yeah.
messing up our gig. And you would pray a lot of times like that. Oh, please be fat, dumb, and happy, and just keep rolling through. But again, to that point, you would see them just roll through, and they had no clue what was actually taking place right in front of them.
That's why you say you get on the computer and send the dispatch a message. Dispatch these assholes to a call right now.
Yeah, no,
say
don't do
anything else.
that, because then they all show up. No, it's so, dude, Border Patrol is the
No.
worst.
Dispatch them to another place.
Oh,
That's what
gotcha,
I'm saying.
gotcha,
Get
yeah.
them out of the air.
Well,
like,
yeah,
hey,
but then you
dispatch
have
them to a call at McDonald's.
then you have dispatchers that know, and they're gonna be like, "Hey, call in. Like, what are they doing over there?" Because curiosity, dude, is the worst. When you tell somebody like, "Hey, could you not come over to this area because we're doing some stuff?" All of a sudden, there's 50 cops over there, and everything. You're like, "Dude, come on, man."
Yeah. Yep. You're exactly right. I used to just get on. I this is where I tell people, having a personal investment into your dispatch. Show up, go to dispatch. Like for me, like it's a trip. I have to go a pretty good distance. But I will make a trip out there and be like, hey, this is what I got going on today. Here's the area. Let's look at the map together. I can't have anybody drive in that area. If you even see them start creeping there, you are my person.
Well,
here is a box of donuts or
and the
Baku,
other
whatever you're into.
The other thing is the outside agencies, right? You don't have control on them, so a lot of times we would do well. Hypothetically, if I was working a case and I needed to transport dope from point A in the south to point B in the north, and I needed to get through an area with zero interruption because I had a confidential informant involved or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of times, you might have to use tactics that aren't normal, i.e., call a certain agency that wears all green and works the border and say, like, hey, there's a drug load coming up this road over here, which was not the road that we were on. And that way you get them all over there so that you can get your stuff through over here. And the cartels use the same tricks too, by the way.
We call it the pond hockey effect. Wherever the puck goes, the whole team goes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So Yeah, that's a good tactic. I like that.
Yeah, it sucks that you have to use it though on your own, on law enforcement.
Yeah, and it is. We had an instance where we were following house burglars. They were violent dudes. They like to kick in doors. If
Ooh,
somebody's in there, they're putting them at gunpoint. Now they hadn't hurt anybody yet, but the writing was on the wall. It was escalating.
yeah.
And they were getting cocky and confident. So we were worried, and we followed them to an adjacent city, and they get to a house, and we made the mistake. And this is, just like you said, it's learning from experience.
Yep.
I'm trying to do the right thing. Hey, let this agency know we're in the area. Please stay away. And it wasn't even 10 minutes. All of a sudden, here comes a patrol car creeping through. Now they were transporting somebody to a certain area. And when I looked at the map, they took this route. Well, what they did was they spooked our guys. They had already kicked the door. They kicked the door and then they ran back. It was a new tactic they're using. They'll kick the door and then they'll go hide. And they just want to see if there's an alarm, if there's any reaction, and they wait. And then they go in. So they'd kick the door. We heard it. We didn't quite have eyes on. But then that patrol car roamed through and it spooked them enough that they left. And we didn't catch them in the act on that time. So I had a very colorful conversation with the sergeant to let them know how bad they just fucked up, and if they go kick in a door and end up killing somebody the next time, this one's going to be on them,
Right.
and specifically that officer and and that sergeant for his lack of control of his guys. So, luckily he didn't complain on me because I probably would have gotten in trouble for my mouth, especially given my rank.
Yeah.
I didn't really have the rank to flex like that, but he didn't know. So yeah, that shit pisses me off, dude. You're right. Cops are the most curious animals out there.
Which, I mean, that's all part of being a good cop, but yeah.
Yeah, good and bad.
Yep.
But have we touched everything that you wanted to touch just to get a little taste of? Because I want to kind of want to expound on some things from here, so we can just kind of one. I want people to know that Matt Thomas is out there doing different things than most departments.
Right.
And he's doing it behind the great leadership of the American Sheriff, Mark Lamb.
Sheriff. Yes.
And he is Mark is been on the podcast as well.
Yep.
And he is running for U.S. Senate.
Yes, he is.
So for the cops that are out there, check him out. It might be a dude that you're interested in. I'm not a big into a politics guy, but I am definitely into a following good leadership guy.
Yeah, and Mark is a great leader. And like I told you can't get more American than the American Sheriff. Dude had no BS, legit lineage to the Mayflower. So he had relatives on the Mayflower come over. Yeah, I mean, come on, man.
Right. And rumor has it that his bloodline goes as far back as the birth of Christ. So and maybe a rumor. I just may have made that up right now, but I'm just saying.
I don't know that he would argue it, but yeah.
Right. His family they were Templars.
Yeah. I mean, it could happen. It's on Wikipedia, so
yeah, just do the 23andMe and see how far back he's gone. I mean, shoot. May be back as far as Constantine. Who knows?
Yeah. But we're trying to, Mark and I both are trying to break through some molds of what law enforcement looks like, and we're trying to restructure this thing because I think we're at a pivotal point in the law enforcement industry. And I mean, guys like you are making it happen. I've got a good buddy, Aram, 911 Strong guy. He's out in California, and
I've got him booked. He's going to do the podcast. Finally,
so good. There's a lot of dudes that are helping with this big pivot, and the big term is humanizing the badge, but I think it's even beyond that, right? It's just it's a change in the whole industry on how we do policing and especially how we treat our police officers, both internally and from our public.
I think we've finally hit this end. Mm-hmm. I think our first approach was so hard on crime,
right?
That's the history of policing. It was drop the hammer on everything. You steal, we're cutting your hand off. That's kind of how policing went. And now that scale kind of got to this middle part, and now we've hit this extreme where it's let's just see how soft we can go and get away with it, and see where it's at.
Well, I'll give you an example, dude, of I think where America can learn from. And so when I told you I was in the National Academy, and so for those who don't know, the National Academy is where they bring leadership from all over the world. You spend 10 weeks together and you do a bunch of leadership stuff, right? You're writing papers, you're doing projects, you're doing all this stuff together. And there was a guy from Africa. He was from one of the countries in Africa, and he was in charge of just thousands of people. And we had to do a paper on community policing. And so we were in a group together, and he was like,
Yeah.
I am not understanding this community policing. And I said, well, it's when you're, kind of engaged with your community and like, I said, ultimately they're doing their own policing. And he says, yeah, but we do that already. And I said, well, like, what do you mean? And he says, I'll give you an example. He says, we had a guy who had committed essentially what sounded like rape on a female. And he said, so we just drove to that small village and we told the elders what he had been accused of and that we needed him in custody by that evening. And he said, so, by dark, the village had taken custody of him and delivered him to our precinct for us. And then, we conducted our investigation and went from there. And he says, now he was fairly beat up and, was very willing to talk to us, but we had nothing to do with that. That was his community that did that. And I said, well, I guess that would pretty much be it, man. I mean, the community pretty much affected that arrest, right? And
Yeah.
but I said, I think in America that would be called kidnapping, but I mean, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Well, you got the Constitution over there. They're
yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I mean, the point being um, that I think we're learning in America that the old ways that we have policed can be adjusted. And I'll give you our county for an example. We have maintained the lowest jail population that we've had since we've taken office. When we took office, we were up around 750 as an average daily population in our jail. So it's not a huge jail, but we've maintained over the past few years an average daily population of 550, so 200 less. And that same time frame, our crime index, meaning how many crimes are taking place, especially violent crimes, has continued to drop. So we're having less crime, we're incarcerating less people, and we've also put more programs in place. And so programs being things to people with addiction, people with mental health issues, getting them the actual help and services they needed because we cannot arrest our way out of those problems. And
Just
so,
like education.
right.
You guys have been educating through Frank.
Yeah, that's right.
I,
That's
I'm,
right.
I'm, it's funny because Frank's a funny dude, but
Yeah.
that's one of the things I enjoy most about him is his ability to, off the top of his head, explain to you exactly why something is against the law.
Right.
And
Right.
if you hadn't heard of it and it's not something familiar with you, like one of the big ones is getting the hell out of the left lane.
Yeah, or mud flaps. Oh, you mean I had to have mud flaps on this lifted truck?
Yeah. So but this is the thing this is the community part. You guys are doing it with humor
Mhm.
and enforcement.
Yeah. Well,
Eh, eh,
because dude, everybody loves, cracking it up and
Yeah.
everybody loves having fun. And so that's what we're doing. We're just having fun with it. We have fun with our people. And like just the other day, the sheriff and I were at an event and we had cops come up and they're like, oh, excuse me, sir, because everything's so structured and your
Yeah.
your rank gets in the way sometimes. Excuse me, chief, can we get a picture? And I'm like, fuck yeah, you can get a picture. Let's do it. Let's do a selfie. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, this,
Yeah.
and they do
Hold
it
on,
to
let
the
me get my
sheriff,
cigar and my gun.
right? But just stuff like that where you're just like,
Yeah.
because I've seen other people just be like, oh, do you know who I am? Don't you see the stars on my collar? I'm very important. I can't be bothered with simple stuff like that. And it's like, dude,
Yeah.
get over yourself and just be a human being to these other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that to me, that's the key. I shared a video with y'all from that Brevard County
Hmm.
sheriff.
Yeah, Wayne Ivy,
That was a fucking brilliant way to put things.
dude, he's
like,
awesome.
hey, here's the example of police work that's not working.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry for that officer that kind of got put on blast.
Right.
That kind of sucks because I guarantee that's what he's been trained to do.
Yep.
That is not on him. So I don't want anybody to think, because I shared that video, I want anybody to think I'm throwing shade on that specific officer. That ain't his fault. That's his leadership's fault in the direction that they've put him. So for that sheriff to get on there and say, he's a wanted felon, a judge signed something and said, bring his ass before me. Your job as an officer is to go get him.
Right.
That's it.
And that's the thing, man.
Felony.
That's where people have to have the clear distinction too for us, right? They say, how do we support you? We'll support how we take care of business. Like when we go after bad guys, it's not pretty because we're not giving them options. The option is you surrender peacefully or we're going to take you. And taking you sometimes means violence. And unfortunately, when a suspect chooses that they don't want to follow and be compliant, our force has to be above their force. So if they're kind of pushing and tugging, that doesn't mean I push and tug back. That means I go hard and fast and get that fight over with and get them in custody so nobody else gets hurt and they don't get hurt. And it doesn't look pretty and it never will. But people have to understand that that is the way you get business done. I'm sorry.
So now you're in the realm of my expertise. So I appreciate the setup because I want to explain exactly what the chief is talking about here. So if I got somebody pushing and shoving me and I start pushing and shoving back, one, it builds confidence in the bad guy. He's going to continue to do what he's doing because obviously words weren't working. If they were, he would have complied. He's not complying. He's fighting me. So when I throw that big haymaker overhand right, and I am trying to knock him out because I want to hit one time and that's it. And then get him into cuffs, whether it stuns him, distracts him, does whatever it does. Because ultimately what will happen is if we keep pushing back and forth and then his confidence builds, he's going to switch to something else. He's going to either switch to a weapon. He's going to try to grab my weapons. And this isn't me just making shit up. This is historically proven over history with uses of force that now I'm going to switch to a taser. Now I'm going to switch to a baton. Now I'm going to switch to something else versus just my hands. And this is the lowest level other than my voice. So I would rather get it one and done versus switching off and then ended up dragging it out to the point where I end up having to use my gun because I get tired, I get fatigued, he hits me, I get dazed, and then I kill the guy when I could have just swung on him just one time or foot sweeped him and threw him to the ground, whatever it is. It's not going to look pretty. It's not going to be good. But in the long run, it keeps him safer. Keeps everybody safer.
And let's take it one step further. The next time that individual deals with a police officer, you're helping that next cop out as well.
Yeah.
Because he's not emboldened to try and go even further the next time. He's going to remember like, okay, non-compliance did not work out well last time. So let's go with compliance this time so that I don't get the same result. If I don't like getting punched and knocked out and ending up in jail that way, since I'm going to go to jail either way, let's just get cuffed up and go.
Yeah. And for your officers out there listening that get kind of on that teeter-totter of like, because sometimes we get caught up because we're not quite ready to pull the trigger, hypothetically speaking, on punching or any of that stuff, because we're trying to avoid doing a bunch of paperwork too. But we're not quite ready to pull that. And the next thing we know, we're getting way, way past that point of the force if we had just done it right then and there. So it's that I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going with that, but
it sounded fantastic, dude.
I know. I started thinking about what you were talking about. But like going to the taser and things of that nature. I had a guy run from me and I tased him and he was on grass, but he ended up running off the grass just as I pulled the trigger on the taser and hit the ground, hit the cement, knocked himself out. But on that, like I've talked to him since then. He's a frequent flyer. Talked to him since then. He's like, I ain't ever running from the police again. Ever. But
perfect point.
That's exactly what you're talking about. And officers out there, young officers especially, that haven't gotten into a use of force, these are things to consider because you are the ones that are are most vulnerable. You're 0 to 5 year cops. I don't care how old you are. You are the most vulnerable for getting yourself in trouble. And a lot of times it's because you hesitate. Hesitation is going to get you in trouble. So, what else you got going on, Matt? What, I know you're starting to make quite a big LinkedIn presence. I see that quite a bit.
Well, I'm trying to push because I'm coming up on the end of my career, dude. So I've got I've got
The next chapter, sir.
next chapter.
Not the
Yeah,
end.
so I've got a couple more years, I think, and I'll be punching out. And so I'm starting to bolster up my LinkedIn. I've been trying to be more present on YouTube because I know that's a thing, and my social medias. I enjoy the social media stuff because you just get to interact with a lot of different people, which is
Yeah.
cool. And I've done some more speaking and teaching, and so I'm getting into that a little bit more. And it's funny because the more that you talk about speaking, the more you find out that people are like, oh, well, would you come here and talk about this?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of happening, which is good, because I'm just kind of working towards the end.
Yeah. You got to put yourself out there.
That's it, man.
I've been trying to do that lately myself. If anybody's out there listening,
Dude, you've
I
been
am always
killing it.
looking for sponsor, baby. I'm looking for sponsors, and right now nobody's taking advantage of these numbers. So
I know, dude. The
the
numbers are
only
good.
the only smart enough person to do that, and they saw the writing on the wall before I got real big with the numbers, is Insight. So I appreciate them for always having the confidence in me and taking a chance on this podcast idea. But I would like down the road, if you're interested, sir, we can just do a little like monthly, quarterly updates on hot cartel stories that have spilled into the U.S.
Let's do it. I'm down, man.
I think that would be kind of a cool little feature. Maybe we could get Frank involved.
Yeah, and I have a few dudes like we've talked about. I have a few dudes.
Yep.
If I can get them to get the right equipment, have them on and give you some different perspective, because there's plenty of experts in the field in this area, man.
Yeah, I think I can get at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. I think I can get 5 more on here. I'm not 100% on that.
So we could do a cartel roundtable, baby.
Yeah, I mean, very minimum. Let's try for 1 or 2 more people and just test the waters and see how that goes.
Yeah,
because you know how it gets when you're trying to talk online like this.
It's like a Geico commercial.
Yeah, you're like, raise your hand. Okay, I want to talk. So, well, I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah,
I think we busted our time a little bit, but I think it was worth it.
Absolutely.
And I think people will get a kick out of this episode. So if you're listening, I plan to pop this actually onto my official podcast. I recorded this one. I know it'll be live. You'll automatically be able to see it on all the social media stuff. I believe Matt shared it on his social media as well. So I appreciate his crowd of people following him. If you could find us on YouTube, that would be like the best compliment you could pay to this podcast. If you could go to our YouTube channel.
Smash that like button.
Yes, and more importantly, smash that subscribe button.
There you go.
Brother's trying to get subscriptions, or just go to our podcast page. If you're looking for our platforms, we're on everything. We're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Rumble. Nobody really uses Rumble, but we're there just in case. So I think I've been on there the whole time since Rumble's been available. And I've got like 2 subscribers on Rumble. So
sweet. That's 2 more than I have, bro.
Yeah, right. So go to all of those places. Again, check out the nrtcca.org if you're interested in coming to that conference or just learning about real-time crime centers. That is something that Pinell County needs to get on board with.
We're working on it, bro. We're working on it.
All right. Yeah, we need to get you guys involved with the organizations. $25 a year. I'm sure the sheriff can handle that out of his own pocket, even if
we got a budget for that.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, appreciate you, Eric. Good having a chat with you, man. And I'll talk to you when I talk to you.
All right, brother. Take it easy.
Yep, be safe.
Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.